Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's meeting for the Scrutiny Committee for the Place and Environment. Welcome to all of our members of the committee, and welcome to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Eggleston, and to Councillor Hobson-Gibson as well. So, welcome. Item 1, to note substitutes in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 4. We have no substitutes. Item 2, to receive apologies for absence. We have none. Item 3, to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any item on the agenda. Please indicate through our microphone unit if you have any declarations of interest. I see none. Item 4, to be agreed by general affirmation. So if people would be happy to say agreed to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of September 2025. Agreed. Those minutes are agreed. Item 5, to consider any items that the Chairman agrees to take as urgent business. We have none. So we move on to item 6, planning policy position statements. Clearly there's a lot of work that's gone into those position statements that are before us this evening. And I'm going to invite Anne Biggs, the Associate Director for Planning and Sustainable Economy, to introduce the report. I should say that Anne's also supported by Andrew Marsh and Geordie Holmes with us this evening. But Anne, over to you in the first instance.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to consider 2 position statements and whether to recommend them to Council on the 10th of December for adoption. The position statements are designed to bridge the gap until the district plan is adopted in order to set out how the Council will support growth and secure infrastructure. They will assist the developers, the towns and parishes, the community, and in particular the planning committees in decision-making as a tool to encourage good development. There is no guidance for production of statements of this type, and it's within the Council's gift to decide to produce and adopt them and the process for doing so. The position statements are included at Appendix A and B. The first is titled Delivering Sustainable Development in Mid-Sussex and contains 8 decision-making principles and supports the sites identified for allocation in the draft plan. The second is entitled Infrastructure and includes updated calculations for developer contributions to support delivery of infrastructure at current costs. It's important to note that these statements sit outside the statutory policy framework and they rely on developers to go the extra mile on a voluntary basis so that they have an understanding of what development we would support, and therefore they can't be used to refuse applications. As well as briefing members and the towns and parishes on these position statements, officers have engaged with the developers through the Developer Liaison Group to ensure they would be received positively and that there was support for this approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Anne. And I think it's important to note that these position statements, as you say, have been done with the support of workshops for the members and engagement with the town and parish councils and developers group. Just from my side, just perhaps for people that are uncertain about what the position statements are intended to do, they're not new, are they? They're not bringing new policies or ideas. It's supposed to be pulling together what was in our district plan and other things just to try and be helpful. Is that the right phrase?
Yes, that's correct. So they follow very much the content of the draft district plan, as I said, in order to bridge that gap until the plan hopefully is adopted, and therefore we won't have the need for position statements once we hopefully get to that point.
Okay, thank you very much. So, speaking with Councillor Bergreen earlier, I think what we would propose to do is have initially any questions on the general principles of the position statements and why we might have them, or anything in the sort of totality, and then after that we will go into any specific questions on the details of either of the position statements, taking them one at a time. Has anyone got any questions or comments in respect to the general principle as to the putting together of the position statements? I think Councillor Peacock.
Excuse me, I've got a sore throat.
So,
I'm not sure if this is a specific question, but I think it does address a key general theme with the position statement. As you say, my understanding is it reinforces what already exists. There's been a vacuum because of the district plan being on pause. It's welcoming to see that the inspectors come back to us and said in January there'll be a meeting, which I think we all will welcome. I don't know if there's any more feedback on that, perhaps there isn't any update. But looking at the actual position statement, specifically at the AONB, that reinforces the importance of the AONB and the High Weald, and it will look to continue to protect the AONB and High Weald from any large-scale single-site developments within it. That will continue to be the case, is it?
I'm going to hand over to Andrew, I think, to answer that one. Thank you, Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the current district plan, the adopted district plan, has our policy on development in the AONB. That still has full weight. The National Planning Policy Framework also has the relevant paragraphs in there about what constitutes major development in the AONB, for example, and what isn't allowed in the AONB. So that will continue to have full weight. So the position statement recognises that both of those exist. I think the only addition that it adds in terms of that is our responsibilities under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, the Crow Act, and just reinforces it. But yeah, everything that's currently in place policy-wise will remain in place and still has full weight.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Thank you, Andrew. Perhaps just as you sort of referenced the district plan, perhaps, Judy, would you be happy just to give an update, just to refresh us where we are from a council perspective?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yes, you're quite right. There isn't very much more to say other than we have received communication from the inspector. She is willing to open the hearings again, and we're anticipating having a hearing around the end of January, beginning of February, and we're just currently trying to find a date that suits all parties and when this chamber is available. But we'll keep you posted as soon as we have any further updates.
Thank you. Positive news, I think.
Very.
Thank you. Councillor Seidler.
Yes, hello, and thank you very much. And obviously welcome this position statements to the extent that they're going to be useful. But the question I really had, and was sort of background point 6, it says these position statements do not replace and cannot be used to replicate the content of the submission draft district plan. So we're sort of dancing on the head of a pin, aren't we? Because they are in the background papers. The structure directly reflects the district plan. And I just want to understand why it is that they cannot, those are the words being used, which seems to be very surprising and extreme. Is that legally they cannot, or they will be irrelevant if they cannot? But if they're being separately adopted, I don't quite understand that point.
Thank you, Councillor Seidler. I'm going to hand over to Andrew.
Thank you. We can't use these position statements as a district plan by the back door, essentially. So in terms of replicating the content, there's a nuance in some of the wording in it. So in the district plan policies, they are all about saying a developer or that an applicant must or has to, very, very strongly worded, whereas the principles that we got in here are just principles, they're not planning policies, and therefore they're more along the lines of that you should, or it'd be jolly nice if you did, I suppose. That's the best way of putting it.
Of course.
If I may, yes, to follow up. So just, and it is to be clear, because I think in one sense, and I haven't gone and read them sort of side by side, and you do allude in point 10, fairly clearly, if you want to delete should and must and replace it with those other words, then I guess that's not transgressing the spirit of replication. That's the point I'm just wanting to make sure is clear. So that's entirely legitimate. So actually not replicating the plan, just delivering it with some slightly less wording is what's actually been done here more than anything else. Correct? Is that right? My understanding is.
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
So I think we can encourage and things to developers, and we can be disappointed in them if they don't deliver, but that's about as far as it goes. Councillor Avery.
Yes, it's more or less following on from Councillor Seidler's thing, that these are they're not rules, they're kind of guidelines in some respects. But, you know, the existing district plan is there, but the new district plan is sort of in limbo between the two. So these kind of are setting the scene, I suppose, for the new district plan as and when it comes into force. But how confident are you guys that a developer will take notice of this, or just sort of think, nah, well, we'll crash through this regardless? How much weight do these position statements have?
Thank you, Councillor Avery, and I think Judy is going to take that in the first instance.
Thank you. We are in a very curious position, aren't we, which we haven't found ourselves in for certainly a long time. And I think it's important to remind ourselves why we're suggesting these and recommending these policies. It's following advice from our KC, who has been advising us over the draft district plan journey throughout. And it's with his encouragement that we're bringing these forward on the basis that, having liaised with our developers, we feel that this is an important tool that we can offer them so that they can get the certainty that they need in order to bring their sites forward in this interregnum. And of course, we would much rather see the sites that are proposed for allocation coming forward during this period than speculative sites. So with that in mind, we liaise with the developers who have told us that they welcome this because it sets out very clearly what's expected of them. And since they were backing the allocations in the district plan, why wouldn't they seek to deliver what was already promised within the policies in that plan? And so they welcome that. So we're reasonably confident that the developers who've got sites identified in the policy, in the position statements, will welcome this and will endeavour, wherever possible, to deliver what we're asking them to deliver. What it also does, though, is it does sort of set a bar for speculative developers to try to meet, because you're right, we can display disappointment that they haven't been able to deliver the things that we're expecting within the principles, the decision-making principles. And that's something, a factor that the planning committee can discuss and take into consideration in the round when they're looking at these applications. So I think we feel that it is an important tool to just basically say, look, as a district, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We support and we fully back our draft district plan. And so much so that we're willing to put it into a position statement in order to make clear to the communities that we're working with that we support the positions that we've got ourselves to in terms of our draft district plan and our current district plan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rees, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm and clarify, so if developers were to come forward with a speculative application and that didn't conform to basically any of these points or some of these points,
you mentioned at the beginning that it was for guidance for the district planning committee, but it seems to me it's more for the developers than us, because we wouldn't be able to, or the district planning committee wouldn't be able to turn this down by saying you don't comply with what we want.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Anne in the first instance. Thank you, Anne.
Yes, so it assists the committee in order to highlight some of the benefits over and above sort of the baseline of the current district plan, and so that it can be used as a material consideration in granting permissions. But yes, it wouldn't be able to be used to refuse applications because it simply doesn't have the teeth of a statutory policy such as in an adopted district plan. So it's very much done on a voluntary basis that we can give credit where developers have gone that extra mile, but we wouldn't be able to use it as a tool to refuse unless there were obviously other statutory policy reasons to refuse an application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Zeidler, you wish to come back?
Sorry, apologies. One further, and just to understand, because you outline in 311 that the submission draft document has limited weight, but it does have some weight, and the position statements will be a material consideration. So they're two different things, both of which have an effect. So perhaps you could. Obviously, the other thing the position statements have, as Judy explains in 4.3, you've got some clarity about what people who aren't in the draft submission have to do, which is separately helpful. But could you perhaps just explain or help me understand the difference between material consideration versus limited weight?
Thank you, Councillor Zeidler, and I'll go back to Anne, please. Thank you.
Yeah, we recognise that this isn't necessarily an easy process to unpick in terms of the weight to be given to various elements, and there is a hierarchy, and position statements will be fairly lower in that hierarchy, just like the weight that can be afforded to the draft district plan until it's been adopted. But we will be seeking to provide some guidance through the officer reports and separately via other channels if it's adopted, just to assist those who will be viewing applications in light of these position statements to explain how that weighting is apportioned. But you're correct, it's a material consideration as an adopted council policy, but it's not a material planning consideration in the same way as policies and guidance within the statutory framework. I realise that's not the easiest thing to comprehend, but we will be providing some guidance to assist on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zeidler. Councillor Bates, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In respect of these unallocated site applications from speculative applications, I mean, it's inevitable, as we've had 2 instances already, of refusing the applications. And is this going to continue? I mean, could one of these sites then be determined as being acceptable? And could we take out something that we've already allocated to try and keep our numbers going? Otherwise, we are going to be bombarded with excessive numbers of house building.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. And now we're going to pass over to Judy in the first instance.
So to answer your question, I think you're taking sites out won't be necessary, because the sites are the sites that are proposed for allocation for the next 15 years. And obviously they're already counted in the council's 5-year land supply, irrespective of whether they get delivered in year 1 or year 15. So they stay there. And the sites that are in this position statement and are stated in here are those sites that the council has already assessed as being deliverable and appropriate, and that's why they're proposed for allocation. These position statements wouldn't have made a difference in terms of the decisions in respect to either the officer's recommendation or the ultimate decision of the planning committee, because as Anne's explained, they're not a material planning consideration. They are a consideration because they're a council policy like every other council policy. But these in and of themselves would not be sufficient a reason to refuse a speculative application. As you know, that will rely on the situation in respect to the council's 5-year land supply and how we interpret the harm versus the benefits. So the tilted balance that we've discussed in the past would be the significant feature in that decision making. I don't know if my colleagues wanted to add anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've got no further questions on general principles. I think we've mostly stayed on general principles, but if anybody's got any specific comments on the first position statement on delivering sustainable development, has anyone got any specific questions on that regarding the wording or context? Councillor Edwards.
I believe this is in that section. It's actually, I think it's on page 20. It's about the water supply. Am I on the right?
Yeah, please,
Part.
go ahead, yeah.
Yes, it's just, as it happens this week, I've been involved in some conversations about the pipeline being built from between Weirwood and Ardingly Reservoir. And as it happens, in my village, last month, tankers were delivering water to us day and night, apparently from Kent, for sort of 3 weeks. So water is sort of somewhat on my mind. And I, this time, read a bit of the Gatwick water cycle, sub-region Gatwick water cycle study, and it just bothers me really that it feels though there is not enough detail about the water shortages that we're already experiencing and what there might be in the future, especially after we've had the hottest summer on record. So it's an issue. And when I saw that the water companies, they haven't included detailed modelling at the site level, they haven't done that, and that just surprised me. It made me just think about infrastructure generally and how important schools are, GP surgeries and everything, but water is really pretty much of a standout necessity for everybody.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. I'm going to hand over to Andrew, please, in the first instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the submission draft district plan has a whole section on climate change and policies related to that, and that includes water resources. The water companies are statutory consultees when it comes to plan making, so they were consulted in terms of the policies in the plan and the location and quantum of development in the plan as well. So that's wrapped up in the plan making system. What the position statement can't do is set standards, because that has to be a planning policy, so that would be picked up in the plan. But as you'll see in under Principle 1, sustainability, we are guiding the developers towards matters that would address the impacts of climate change, flood risk and sustainable drainage in there. So we're doing as far as we can go in a statement, but obviously the plan itself will once adopted, contain some policies that will have full weight in terms of climate change resilience and standards.
Thank you. I did think about that at the time, but it just occurred to me it's partly the fact that we've just had literally the hottest summer on record that made me think, oh, this is almost an opportunity to rethink it. But I hear what you're saying, and thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on position statement 1? Oh, Councillor Seidler.
Yes, I'd like to just clarify the context in which this is written, and I'm going to actually preferred sites item 5 on page 13, because the statements made the submission draft district plan proposed sufficient housing sites to meet the housing need for the district, which is entirely true, which was obviously based on 1,090. But equally, if we're not running to that schedule, we have a target that I believe is 1,330, and therefore the draft submission plan would not be adequate. And I'm a bit confused that this position statement needs probably to have been written for the latter situation, does it? Or is it reasonable to presume, since we're still in the process of an inspection, which is excellent and we wish to continue to be, that is correct? That just seems, again, obviously a challenging position, but just to be clear that these position statements are being written for our existing position in inspection.
Andrew, please, thank you.
Yes, that's correct. So the position statement itself doesn't set a target. It doesn't include a target because it can't. But what we are referring to in here is that we have a plan that we've submitted to the Secretary of State that's currently still at examination, that under the evidence that we've got, we believe meets the target that plan is being measured under. So that's the context of this. So we're not looking to put more sites in this plan because at the moment we haven't had a conclusion on the housing numbers in that plan.
And I think this plan position statements are revoked if the plan is accepted.
Correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Any follow-up or any further questions on position statement 1? Any comments in respect of position statement 2 in respect of the infrastructure position? Any remaining comments from officers in respect of position statement 2? No. Any comments from any other members or cabinet members? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Just in position statement 1, if you'll permit me to go back to that, could the officers just say a little bit about DP 12 and DP 13, and they're given amber, and I just wondered whether or not they should have been red, as they do have an implication for the geographical delivery. And the other thing is, just in the neighbourhood plans, it's a disappointing list. And I just wondered if officers had any advice on the way forward for neighbourhood plans.
Thank you. Hand over to Andrew for that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Yeah, DP12 and DP13, it says in the text, it's not the entirety of those policies that would be or could be rendered out of date in a situation where we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. So they do have some elements to them which would still remain in date. So we put it as amber, and that's because a case officer, depending on the application in front of them, will determine whether that policy would have full weight or no weight at all. So they're not unlike, for example, DP4, DP6, which relate to housing numbers. Those are out of date in NPPF terms because of the tilted balance. Not quite the same for 12 and 13. In terms of neighbourhood plans, we just get to the appendix. The advice that we've been giving neighbourhood plan groups over the last few years is to wait until the district plan is adopted. What we don't want any of those groups to do is do any abortive work. We recognise there's a lot of work involved in preparing a neighbourhood plan, a lot of cost. And so what we wouldn't want them to do is to adopt a plan with policies in it which could be rendered out of date very, very quickly should the district plan be adopted, because it's the latest plan that's adopted that takes precedence. So our advice to them is to wait until it's adopted, and then we'll review it.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Zeidler.
Sorry, yes, and it is actually just a question for information, because I actually had a slightly different view. I mean, I understand saying neighbourhood plan is disappointing because they're not current, but at the same time, to have 100% coverage, I think is practically unique. And I just wanted to ask whether that was the case, because my impression from talking to other districts is that actually Mid Sussex has done an amazing job in the number of neighbourhood plans that have actually been brought forward, and I've heard exactly the advice you've given, and appreciating the time and effort it takes to put one together, I think it's been the correct advice.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Judy.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, this council really did put its resources behind the concept of neighbourhood planning, and we in fact trialled the process. And led the way. And at one time, we were certainly, I think, one of the first councils to adopt or make, we don't adopt neighbourhood plans, we make them, to make a neighbourhood plan. And at one stage, we were the only council that had full coverage of all of its areas, because you can do it over more than one parish, but that all its parishes covered by a made neighbourhood plan. So certainly, yeah, we have shown a full commitment, and you're right, it is encouraging to see that every parish did actually make a neighbourhood plan, and hopefully they can update those once we have a district plan in place, if they're so minded.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everyone for the questions. I see no further questions, so if we move to recommendations, the first one, I think, speaks for itself, namely that we have to consider the position statements before us, which I hope we can all say that we've done. So therefore, I think we can move on to recommendation 2, which is to recommend to Council approval of position statement 1 delivering sustainable development in Mid-Sussex, and position statement 2, infrastructure. So if we could just vote with our buttons that we are happy to recommend these position statements to council, please. Thank you. So I think that's unanimous. So thank you very much for everyone's contributions to that debate, and thank you very much to the officers for all their work on the position statements and for answering our questions this evening. Item 7, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice of which has been given. I have none, and so therefore I'm pleased to close this meeting. Thank you everyone for their attendance at 7:30. Thank you.